I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and today we'd like to talk to you about exercising your spiritual muscles. Exercise is necessary in all aspects of our life, but I guess it's really necessary in the spiritual realm, isn't it, Iris?
Yes, indeed it is, just as it is in every other aspect of life. If we just go mildly from day to day without thinking about spirituality and our own how it applies in our lives, then we just go along with in a more mundane way. But when we think about it, read things that are pertinent to our belief, and then read things that are pertinent to all beliefs, so that stretches our muscles, doesn't it?
And even just taking time to be peaceful and center ourselves. And we spend a fair amount of time on this program and at church and everywhere, you and I both talking about meditation and the value of that. But really, the exercise of exercising our spiritual muscles includes allowing them a time of refreshment, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And also, it adds so richly to our lives, and sometimes we don't realize it. It's just like we can go along in our everyday life with our family, friends, workplace, in a blah, mundane way, and our life is not nearly as rich as if we put energy into each contact and each person and event. And so the same is true of a spiritual nature. And we hear so much today about people attuning themselves to the divine so that they speak to God or speak to the divine, their angels and so forth. And I think a lot can be said for that, because throughout the ages, we've had messages from the inner planes of being, messages from Creator God, messages from God, lesser gods, messages from various ones. And who knows if some of that comes from people's imagination, but we can assume that a great deal of it is reality. And it makes life so much more rich when we're able to attune ourselves and get messages. And of course, meditation is a very important part of our lives. And when we meditate, we ask questions and we get answers. And we get our own answers. We ask questions silently and get the question answered inside our head so that it's silent. But it's a very private endeavor and a very private answers that we get. But it adds so greatly to our lives.
Yeah, this issue of spiritual exercise, a lot of times I think probably to a lot of our viewers when we begin just with a topic, especially people from perhaps a more traditional background, may think of spiritual exercises as being, well, I read the Bible, or I go to church, or I pray, or I do these things. And sometime in the future, one of our topics really is going to have to do with the difference between religion and spirituality, and there is a real difference. And as we're going through this process today, talking about exercising our spiritual muscles, I think it's good for us to to remind ourselves and to remind our viewers that there is a difference between spirituality and religion, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And I would define it as spirituality as being a very personal aspect of our being. And it reaches out to others. It reaches out into the community. It reaches out wherever we go. But the religion aspect is our public part. It's the church that we attend, the rallies that we attend, or whatever we attend, so that it's public. And spirituality is very intimately personal, but yet that then aspect of our being reaches out to others, but in a totally different way than religiosity. And that's not decrying either of those two. It's not saying that it's saying that they're both a part of our lives, and they're both essential, because it's essential that we get together with groups in our churches, temples, and so forth, mosques, and so forth, so that we are worshiping together, because that adds so richly to our lives, unless we're a hermit. And so when we reach out to others, we, in a spiritual way, then we're really taking God with us, and we are being a positive influence in the lives of others, just as others are a positive influence in our lives when they reach out to us in a spiritually oriented way.
Yeah, so I'm thinking so often about, say, the workplace or with our neighbors or our friends. And a lot of times, if we don't separate this issue of spirituality from religion, and again, we're not negating the importance or the value of either of those things. And we always talk about the fact that everything we share on this program is about metaphysical philosophy, which doesn't proselytize. We don't go out from a religious standpoint, although metaphysics is to us a religious faith as well, but it is a deeply and profoundly spiritual faith and a philosophy of life. So from our faith tradition, we don't proselytize, we don't go send missionaries out, but we don't have a problem with those who do. But certain religions would send, say, a missionary out in order to convert someone to a particular religion. And when we look at spirituality and the integration of spirituality in, say, the workplace, and today, of course, there are a lot of articles and books and speakers and presenters who are presenting spirituality in the workplace with the understanding and realization of the diversity and respect for the diversity that exists within the workplace. And so it is very possible as we go out and share spiritual techniques and share spiritual values that we need not necessarily be sharing our religious views or values or imposing those upon others. And so spirituality is a much more transcendent experience, and it's much more broad and inclusive, really acknowledging that there is a divine reality or an unseen reality or motivation within all that exists. And then we leave to the church and to the temple and to the mosques and the houses of worship, the corporal practice of religion, and that is a difference. And so I think that the spiritual exercises, having said that in a long way, so we're talking about really demonstrating and exercising our spiritual muscles and making them stronger, which really have to do with moral fiber and character and right judgment and honesty and wonderful and positive virtues that cross over all of the lines of religion.
Yes, and when we live in that fashion, we exert a spiritual aspect of being into the lives of others without bringing up the words, but it's just by our own action. And we all know people who have unquestionable integrity. We know people who would be fair and honest with everyone, people who would be loyal to the workplace, to their friends, to their family, have the quality of loyalty in all aspects of being. And that's a very important part of spirituality, because it's when we're living from the highest aspect of our own beinghood that we are exercising spirituality, exercising our spiritual muscles, and therefore impacting on the lives of others. And it's a very wonderful thing to know that yes, we are making a difference in the world when we live in that fashion, because we all know people that we can depend on their word, that they'll do. If they say they'll do something, they'll do it, or else they have a good reason for not, and they let you know. So this is a part of life that is the unseen aspect of spirituality, as it were, isn't it?
Absolutely. And understanding that and embracing that concept and using that that understanding and that teaching to empower us and to strengthen us really does create stronger persons. And when we talk about persons, of course, in today's environment, we still see a lot written about the mind-body-spirit connection. Maybe not as much as we did 10 years ago or so, but there's still that very real truth that we are triune beings, and we have a mind, and we have a body, and we have a spiritual nature. And when we put all of those things together, and they all work with integrity and in a positive way, and as you said so well, from our higher self, then we become even more noble than we thought we were. And more importantly, others are even more noble than we see them. And that takes us into seeing really beyond what they are saying or doing, which may not be consistent with the highest and the best in which is in them.
Yes, and people decry the climate of civilization today in every country and every aspect of being, but I think that we've evolved to an ever higher level, and we truly exist on a higher level today than we did 25 years ago, 50 years ago, and so forth as we go back in time, because we know more fully the consequences. And it's a wonderful thing to know. It's a very beautiful thing to believe in our fellow man, that people are living to their highest. And one thing that's very important is when we go through our day thinking positively, we're living from the spiritual aspect of being. When we think negatively constantly, then it's the opposite. So, and every thought is a prayer. And sometimes we forget that. We think we have to be praying in a formal way to be praying, but that's not so. And we know that God acknowledges when we pray by our every thought. And that's good to know too, isn't it?
That's a spiritual truth. We're praying always.
Exactly.
Always.
Exactly.
And so we're praying and we're creating and we're speaking loudly not only to the divine, but we're speaking to those around us. Sometimes too loudly.
Perhaps. But also it makes us go through our days. Those of us who keep our consciousness in present time and think in a positive way, and I wouldn't just say spiritual, but it is spiritually oriented, because everything is spiritually oriented, and is spiritually oriented in a positive way or negative way. So when we do that, then we go through our days more happily, and others around us then it reflects in the lives of the people around us. And so, and we're less tired at the end of the day. And we can get so much more accomplished if we do that. And I think that you and I and our listeners can just think of a typical day that we spend. If we're fighting gravity in a very intense way, then fighting life, then we're more tired. And when we just let things flow and just go with the flow, which is what we're doing when we're being positive, then we're less tired. And we're also far more productive. And we've seen people who fight and flail around with their day's work, and then they create chaos. But those who are calm and serene and just do their work in a calm way are far more easy to be with and desirable. And also at the end of the day, they have a greater sense of accomplishment, because truly they have accomplished more.
And as they do that, or practice these principles that you just shared, it is a process of exercising their spiritual nature and spiritual muscle. And one of the things that we know from physical exercise is we feel better from it, don't we?
Exactly.
We actually gain, but if it is something that is exhaustive to us, then we're probably not exercising in the proper way. And so that's an important distinction to make, and it's a little test to give in terms of where we are from the source from which we're operating.
Exactly, to test ourselves, to not test others, because how can we know? And to test ourselves. And of course, we believe that we have pre-birth agreements or sacred contracts before we're born. We create those with others. And so if we're living the way our blueprint shows, then we also come through the day far more happily and less tired, more relaxed and more serene. And we know then if we're following that. And you take people who are living very through traumatic experiences, and yet they seem calm about it and show a serenity that's remarkable. Then we know that that person is living up to what they've planned before they came into this earth life.
Yeah. We know that they've been exercising their spiritual muscles properly and correctly. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some information.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
Before the break, we talked, or you touched on something that I think is certainly worthy of our discussion in the last half of the program, and that is that we are really more than our humanness, but our humanness in being human beings, that's a great and wonderful gift. And a lot of people, of course, will make being human itself a negative from a spiritual or religious standpoint, and we don't have quarrels with those people, but we don't agree with them. So we think that being human is a positive expression, but so often people will say or feel that they say or do something simply because, well, and their response is, I'm only human. And one of the things that we know is we're not only human. We are spiritual at our very core and our essence. And understanding and realizing that our true nature is a spiritual nature is certainly an illuminating fact that can change our perception and maybe not make us feel so badly when we look in the mirror as time changes. And I think that looking in the mirror and time changes are good, although we can see also the vibrancy of our spiritual nature shining forth in our physical nature as well. But we are spiritual beings, aren't we?
Yes, we are, and we need to remember that, because it makes life far richer and more important, and it gives substance to life that it wouldn't otherwise have. And so we know that when God flung out from himself pristine spirits, that's the human beings, then then we were a part of God, and we are a part of God. So if we look at our lives in that fashion, that we are co-creators with Creator God, it gives far more importance to our lives, and I think it helps make us better in all that we do.
It allows us to look differently at life and to look differently at circumstances and situations. And also it gives us an innate resource or a limitless resource upon which we can draw to deal with the circumstances that we face. And we do face all kinds of circumstances, good, bad, and otherwise. And one of the things that we also want to point out, which we do over and over again in this program, is no matter how good we get at any of the principles and ideas and teachings that we share, that there's going to be difficulty, there's going to be challenge in all of our lives. And so we need to be strong, and that this spiritual strength can give us the ability to be strong in the face of even some of our human, psychological, and seeming spiritual weaknesses.
Well, it's agreed by all that we grow through adversity, and that seems to be part of the evolutionary process. And we have valleys and peaks, and if we don't have those, then we would just be existing. And then why would we need to be here on Earth? Because we know that the inner planes of being are far more happy and desirable than here on Earth. But there are aspects of being on Earth that we don't have on the inner, and one is the physical body to experience those things which we do experience here. And so if we keep a perspective like that, we keep a different perspective on what happens in our lives that is very unpleasant and very difficult to deal with. But we can also at that same time realize that if we didn't have that, then why be here on Earth? And we're growing. Life is an evolutionary process. And as we grow from lifetime to lifetime, that's part of the overall process, that mankind is rising ever to a higher level. And so this is very important to remember when we decry all the horrible things that are happening on Earth. And granted, there are horrible things happening all around us all the time, but that's life, isn't it? That's Earth life.
That's Earth life, and also it is an experience that is limited to this, what we call the earth plane.
Yes.
And that's important to understand. And that's not to say that it doesn't cause discomfort and unhappiness and tears and anguish and all of the rest of it. But as we connect our divine nature or our spiritual nature with our physical nature, and then connect that with our mental capacities, we become such magnificent beings, don't we?
Yes, and it's so inspiring to see others live through their faith expressed in that fashion. And we know that as we look at life in that way, in a positive way, and in a growing way, and accepting, and not accepting, oh, woe is me, but accepting that this is I'm living life in the process in which it was meant to be lived, and nothing stays the same, nothing. And so when we do it, like when we live in that fashion, we can take what comes, and we're not beaten down when things happen that are very unexpected, unhappy, or traumatic, because we know it's part of the process. And that doesn't mean we don't feel as deeply as ever, but it means we feel with a hope instead of despair.
And that hope is another way of really drawing upon the positive aspect of life. And of course, over and over again, we talk about the positive and the negatives, and we always have a choice. And life is filled with choices, and we need, and we're called always to make the best choice, and the best choice is always to be as positive as we can, even in the face of adversity and difficulty.
And even when we need to cough, we can think, well, there's help for me from the inner planes. Whatever we're going through, we can know that help is available.
And so, as we exercise this spiritual dimension of ourselves, we do become so much more empowered and so much healthier, and our vitality is enhanced, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And not only that, but our quality of life is so remarkably better. And our quality of life determines how we're going to respond. Because if our quality of life is poor forever, then we don't have time to get our breath back again and be back to normal. And so we can be grateful. And gratitude is something that we really need to express over and over daily. And I think that in our prayers and in our meditations, if we express gratitude to God, we have a much richer life. And we need to express gratitude to those around us too, to people on earth. Because very often we forget the importance of expressing gratitude, don't we?
Absolutely. And that expression of gratitude is so much, or can be, such a positive force for exercising these spiritual muscles we're talking about. Because gratitude is really, it's like working the free weights or walking, and it just does so many wonderful things for our spiritual nature, and correspondingly for our physical nature as well.
Yeah. Well, we can itemize it, as it were, that we need to have confidence and faith in God, in a higher being, regardless of our religious background or beliefs. And when we have a higher being that we look to, then we have that guide or guidelines to follow. And if we lead a life in a positive way, then we're living up to that holy aspect of being. And also, we can know that God resides within us. There is a flame or a spark of God within every living person. And so when we think of life in that way, it's far more precious. And we exercise our spiritual our spiritual muscles in a much different way, in a more positive way.
As we acknowledge that presence within, then we really do draw upon this limitless resource of vitality, and we exercise even more ferociously, don't we?
Yes, and when we So I would recommend that our listeners look at their own lives and see where they live life spiritually when they haven't even been realized that that's a spiritual aspect of being. And then that we consciously live each day more fully, more joyously, more attuned to the divine within. And it's not being pious and it's not being religiosity. It's just living from our higher self, because we know that we have more than one body and that our higher self is that aspect of being that's connected with Creator God. And when we do that, and those people who are happy and well-adjusted do that always.
Yeah. It's amazing as you were speaking, and I was just thinking of how often people come and you and I both spend a lot of time counseling, and we spend a lot of time talking to people, maybe too much time. I don't know. We talk a lot, but but as we talk to people, people seem to marvel at the amount of vitality that people like ourselves, and it's not unique to Mike or Iris, but people within our movement and within our school of thought are able to deal with the challenges of life. And a good deal of that has to do with the view that we have of life and of our relationship to each other, to those around us, to the presence and power of God, to the reality of all of these principles that we're talking about. And every one of those things that I just ran through very quickly are just a little snippet of things that offer exercise to our spiritual nature and our spiritual being.
Yes, and I think the people who are calm and serene at the end of every day and in their relationships with others are those who have a realistic view of life. And by realistic, I mean they realize and expect that life is not always going to be the most beautiful, that unpleasant things are going to happen. We're all born, we all die, we all have problems to endure throughout our lives. And so if we expect that and we don't vilify life in that fashion, and we know that these things are going to happen. The people we love are going to be taken from us. There's change in life. They might not be taken from us in death, but in other ways. But life is, God gave mankind free will. Everyone has the free will to make their own choices. And we can't go against other people's free will overmuch. And so if we realize all that, then we don't fight life. We flow with life.
We go with it, and magnificent and positive things happen. And so as we bring this program to a close, we want to encourage all of you to exercise your spiritual muscles, to do the things that allow you to see the positive aspects of life, and to share your life and your experience with those people who have positive and affirmative views of life. And we look forward to seeing you next time.